development.
Okay, so we just started streaming on YouTube, and I think I messed up and wasn't initially streaming. So we're going to try this again and rewind back to the beginning of the debate. So we are breaking down Charlie Kirk's viral debate at Cambridge University that was earlier this summer, and it got a lot of traction. It's made a lot of headlines. It's been clipped an unlimited amount of times, and it got so much overall reach that I had to do a fuller deep dive breakdown here. And even as a very small channel on TikTok and Instagram, I did a couple of quick reaction videos to Charlie Kirk, and they ended up blowing up beyond belief. So because of that, I got a lot of comments saying that it was unfair, that I was misrepresenting Charlie Kirk's arguments by clipping and not including his response. So we're going to include his response here and be fair about it by showing the full debate and breaking it all down. We're just going to fast forward to the beginning of the debate here. And I got a bingo card with all the logical fallacies so that we can learn and watch as Charlie Kirk gets through all of these ad hominem, false cause, red herring, straw man, etc. Gish, gallop, anecdotal evidence, false dichotomy, cherry picking. So instead of explaining all of these at the beginning, as the conversation continues, I'll explain what each of these are throughout his debate. So let's check it out now that we're actually live on YouTube. And I might just double check that because earlier I thought I was, and I was not. But now I am. So because of that, we can start the debate. Let's begin.
You seem to be dodging it for some reason.
No, I've debated him twice in the last year, and he's coming on this summer for a long-form discussion. But is this what I can expect?
Yeah, he's making videos about you avoiding him on your campus debates.
So the first questioner at Cambridge University, ironically, out of all the things to asks him why he hasn't debated Dean Withers. And it's interesting, this was a couple of months ago when he said that he was going to have like a longer sit down with Dean on his channel. And I don't believe that happened. So now that is making me wonder if he is starting to avoid Dean for one reason or another. But I can understand a little bit why Charlie Kirk wouldn't go out of his way to debate Dean at this point, because he's not a traditional journalist. And even though he has a really big social media following, he doesn't have a traditional media presence. And I could see it being pretty surprising to, get this question at Cambridge University of all places at the very beginning of this debate.
Right. So let me tell you how this works. I do a campus event like at Texas A&M University. I rent it out. I'm there for 3 hours. He shows up demanding to come up to the mic immediately, cutting in line of other students. It's not Joe Biden's America anymore where you can just cut in line and get whatever you want. So therefore, I say, excuse me, Dean, we'll talk at another time. He makes this YouTube video as if I'm scared to debate him, even though I debated him twice in the last year. Does that sufficiently answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, on the bingo card, I'm already going to check off arrogant remark because he had a bit of a face when he was saying that he already debated, and if that answers her question. So we've already got one item crossed off on the bingo card.
From Anglo-Ruskin University.
So, firstly, thank you for coming here, Charlie. It's nice to meet you. So my question is, I am a conservative, and I did back Trump in 2024, but I'm troubled that the GOP refuses to hold him accountable for his personal and legal failings. And how can we claim to stand for moral values and the Constitution while excusing behaviour that we condemn from the left? Isn't it the hypocrisy undermining our credibility, especially...
Can you hear the audio and my microphone as well on TikTok? Let me know.
Well, countless things that he's done.
The what?
Stormy Daniels. The bus interview that he put down to locker room talk. His multiple legal values, filings.
And what would you like to see them do? And you voted for this man. So,
no, I can't vote for him.
Whatever, you said you voted, or whatever, I don't know. Plenty of Americans, I don't know, you said you supported him, so...
Yeah.
Is that correct? Maybe I'm putting...
Yeah, no, that's correct.
You supported him, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that. I supported him on some of his policies and him, but a lot of conservatives, I'm not saying you personally, but a lot of conservatives refuse to call him out or critique him on anything and will ignore that straight away.
I mean, I critique him. He's a friend of mine. I might critique him. I don't think Canada should be the 51st state. We have enough liberals in America.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, cheers.
Our next question is from Kai Bevan at Trinity Hall.
So that might literally be the only time I've heard him disagree with Trump on something, saying that he doesn't think Canada should be the 51st state. So that's news to me.
So thank you for coming, Charlie. My question to you, I mean, I'm a medical student, and so I'm going to throw out the big A word. I know you get asked about it a lot, but I want to hear it from you. What your opinion is on abortion.
Life begins at conception.
But about abortion specifically, why do you think abortion's wrong specifically?
Well, you agree murder is wrong?
I agree. Okay, so this is where we get to the question, right? Because what is it about murder you say is wrong? Like, why is murder wrong?
Well, because it's a human being, not just because it has consciousness or because it's of a certain age, because it's a human.
What is it that gives human being this moral worth?
Not its consciousness necessarily.
I didn't say it's consciousness.
I know that. I can imagine it because it is a human being, because that has a soul.
And what is this soul? Where does this come from? This idea that it's...
Exactly. I mean, again, the Greeks postulated that it is the entirety of your being. Okay, you guys can laugh. I mean, it's true. I mean, every civilization has had a different belief, but agreed upon ethical monotheism.
He's a synagogue lover. Can you say that?
Certificate of my country
I don't know.
is that every human being is more than just matter. It's more than.
Do you hear Charlie Kirk debating right now? I just want to make sure, because I have an audio interface hooked up to my phone and I've never tried that before, and I'd be curious from your end to make sure you can hear that as well as me. So let me know if you can.
So has an invisible element to you that will live beyond you.
Fine. So, I mean, can you say that comes from the Bible, or where else do you get that from?
Ethical monotheism, which is the creed of the West. And again, the Declaration of Independence mentions God 4 times. The founders were explicitly believed.
Oh, you don't hear?
In a secular morality,
You don't hear a debate right now?
Given one of at least
That's
this
not good.
idea that there is a God and you are not him. And let me ask you, what is the first stage of human development?
So the first, I mean, this is the thing, right? We can take it from the sperm being generated in the father and the oocyte being generated in the mother, right? They fuse at birth, conception, sorry. The only thing that happens at conception is these 2 cells fuse.
No,
right?
DNA is created. A zygote.
DNA is not created.
A DNA, no, that's not true. The DNA,
Charlie,
the DNA coding at the zygote. Hold on, time out.
Yeah, I'll let you finish.
Does a zygote have a unique marker?
Charlie, DNA...
Does a zygote have a unique marker?
You have to let me speak. You have to...
But answer it, yes or
Charlie,
no. Does a zygote have a unique marker?
Define a unique marker.
Meaning, can you differentiate the DNA coding between the mother and the zygote if you examine it under a deoxyribonucleic acid analysis? Can you?
Only purely because the addition comes from the father.
Really?
Oh, so
Interesting.
it is something different.
Interesting theory. Appreciate that.
DNA is not created. You have the father has his own genome, the mother has her own genome. They fuse. This is why you have the same characteristics, similar ones to your mother, similar ones to your father. That's why you have similar characteristics to your siblings. DNA is not created. Come from, I can say to you it starts at conception, but all conception is these 2 cells joining, right? But these 2 cells were created, the mother's cells were created long before, they were created when she was a fetus. So there's none of this DNA being produced, right? So we can't establish, the only thing that happens at conception is these 2 cells fuse. Now this idea that means that for some reason suddenly that moral worth comes in, but it wasn't there before when you had these 2 cells who had half the DNA. But suddenly there's
Correct.
This is a little bit of troubleshooting and problem solving here.
We know about this.
Hold on.
Charlie.
Time out. Hold on.
Charlie, I promise you, I'm not trying to score points. I'm not trying to score points on you. This is genuine.
We call it the miracle of life for a reason. We've not been able to yet replicate human life development outside of the womb.
We call it the miracle of life because yes, it's something beautiful, the ability to form a new...
Magical.
It's not... You say magical as in, oh, it's beautiful, it's an incredible thing that happens, of course. But it's not incredible in the sense we don't know what's going on. There's no new DNA coming out of nowhere.
Hold on, but time out. Isn't there a separate DNA, though, than the mother? Like,
Yes, from the father.
okay, yes, but it's not the father's DNA either. A new coding is created.
Charlie,
You are a blend of the two. And so when did your life begin?
Okay, so
When did your life begin?
I mean, again, this comes from what you define as where life starts. You can say life starts at conception, but I'm telling you, I believe that's just an arbitrary point, right? That's just the moment these two cells fuse. Now, you say about this mother thing. So the way DNA is arranged in a cell is it's arranged in chromosomes. Chromosomes are paired up, so you have one from the mother, one from the father, typically, in a healthy individual, right? Now, you can take those maternal chromosomes out and you can find that this is who the person's mother is, and you can do the same with the father. Now, the reason you are different to your mother and father is because some of those chromosomes express genes that are different from each other.
We're watching on YouTube as well.
Those genes interact, and that's what gives rise to you.
It might work better on YouTube here, folks.
There's no
Check me out there.
Any kind of moral framework to come into that until you consider that a human being is capable of consciousness and of suffering. But if you take that out of the equation, the fact that these two DNA, whatever they call molecules, right? These two DNA molecules are fusing. That does not suddenly flip a switch that attributes moral worth to that individual. I mean, I'm just saying, I'm not trying to score points.
Right,
I'm trying to understand.
by what moral standard do you believe that?
I believe that if an individual is capable of suffering, then it's wrong. Now, can I explain my opinion on abortion, just so you can understand? I would agree, as many reasonable people would, that at 9 months, it's unreasonable to expect someone to get an abortion, right? Unless you have some extreme circumstances. But for an elective abortion seems a bit radical to me. But it also seems radical to say that a woman who has just, the cells have just fused, to deny her of an abortion also seems wrong to me. Because that zygote is not capable of suffering, as far as we know.
So by what moral standard? Is that just your opinion? Where did you get that moral standard from?
Because suffering is a bad thing. We all know suffering is a bad thing. That's an objective fact, right?
Well, hold on. So you do believe in objective morality?
I believe that suffering is an objectively negative
So if you can't feel it, is it okay?
What do you mean if you can't?
You can't feel the pain, is it okay to inflict the pain?
In the sense that if no one's suffering from it, if you have a scenario where nobody is suffering from something, then yes, of course. Something is only a moral question if it affects someone's well-being.
So let me just make sure I understand this correctly.
All right, folks, I tried on the TikTok, but I don't think it's working out for me volume-wise, so we're going to switch to YouTube, okay? A rhetorical report, so check it out.
Dementia patients because they're confused about their well-being?
Can you imagine a scenario?
Or Alzheimer's patients.
Charlie,
Alzheimer's patients don't really know much about anything. Can we schedule them for execution because they can't technically suffer?
Now respond. So can you imagine a scenario where we lived in a society where we killed people when they suffered from dementia, were incapable of suffering, and we killed them, right? It's not a scenario that involves an absence of suffering. There's still suffering involved. Imagine you grow up thinking, my dad could be killed at any moment because he's going to get dementia. Imagine living your life thinking, I could get dementia and suddenly I'd be killed by my state.
Imagine a world where you slaughter 1 million babies every year in America.
Charlie, it's not slaughter. That's the problem.
Hold on. If it's a forcible removal.
Okay, this is for sure gonna be on the bingo card here. So we just heard that abortion is equivalent to slaughtering 1 million babies, which is definitely a straw man. Okay, straw man, that was like the one thing I updated it on this bingo card, but it's not there. But that's a straw man as well. I'm gonna go grab my other bingo card here because I had straw man on there. So let me go find that one. Okay, so he's definitely had some arrogance, but there's definitely a straw man there on the abortion issue so far, but let's keep going.
The umbilical cord of another human life. Again, we have clarity but not agreement. Biologically, you know that your entire coding began at conception. Your coding,
that's
your uniqueness.
That's what I'm denying. I disagree with that.
Okay, when those two cells fused together, to use your terminology,
yes,
that is where the process of
scientifically accepted terminology.
In the interest of time, can we bring this question to a close?
The process of human development objectively begins at that moment. Therefore, those human beings are deserving of human rights. We keep going, or do you want to?
No, thank you. Yeah, you can finish.
The process of development begins from the moment the sperm is being generated in the father, the moment that eggs are being generated in the mother. To say that suddenly the moral worth switches on when they fuse doesn't make any sense. That's just a point you've taken.
It makes perfect sense, because that is when your journey as a human being, when the sperm and egg were separate, you were not yet a fused human being. You were not created uniquely.
DNA existed.
An image.
Your DNA existed. I thought.
Well, no, the parts of your DNA existed. Your DNA did not exist. It's like saying that we have a full car just because we have all the parts. It was not yet put together until conception happens and the zygote was formed. Thank you. I think we have to
Can we move on to the next question, please? Thank you.
You were just trying to skate out of that one. He didn't want to talk about that.
So, thank you. Our fourth question tonight is from Rudy Ellis-Jones from Emmanuel College.
Hello, thank you for coming to today's talk. So my question, as someone studying archaeology and biological anthropology, I've learned that moral codes and social norms have always been fluid, shaped by time, culture, power. So many ancient and recent societies embraced same-sex relationships and even the idea of third genders well before Western conservatism even existed. So when you claim that modern conservative values represent some kind of universal, objective moral truth, like you said on your chair over there, aren't you just defending a selective, historically recent ideology that erases most of human history and targets people who have always been part of it?
No, but can you point to me of a... And maybe you can educate me. Can you point to me a great power that endorsed same-sex marriage? Not cohabitation, but marriage.
Ancient Mesopotamia.
As marriage. As recognized.
As marriage that exists.
Recognized by the state.
100%.
And how did that work out for them?
It worked out perfectly fine. It was an accepted norm of society.
Okay, I still think it's wrong.
Okay, swiftly moving on. So you said it was based on scripture and you believe that there are moral,
Correct, yes.
objective, universal truths.
Yes, there are.
So
murder is wrong today and murder was wrong 2,000 years ago.
Right, okay.
Okay, so this is a pretty clear appeal to tradition. So let's check that off the bingo card here. Where do we have appeal to tradition? Somewhere. There we go. He just said that gay marriage is wrong because it's not in tradition. And that's a logical fallacy. So let's keep watching.
Same sex, but fair. I see your point. But
there are moral truths that are transcendent of time, place, and matter.
Okay, but so just to clarify, you believe that this is in the Bible. This is laid out in the Bible, that
this
man
here.
shall not sleep with man, and so therefore...
Well, it's also repeated throughout the New Testament as well. In the book of Matthew, Jesus reaffirms the biblical standard for marriage.
Okay, so I'm going to make two very, very quick points. So the first, so if we look at the Old Testament in isolation, just to start off with, as an example. So let's look at Exodus 35:2, which suggests that if you work on the Sabbath, you should be put to death. If you look at Leviticus 11:7, it suggests that if you have pork, you should be put to death. Let me finish, I'll be done. If you plant two crops side by side, you should be stoned by your entire village. If you wear a suit, which you are wearing now, that contains two different fibers intertwined into the same jacket, you should be burned to the stake by your own mother. Now, following that rationale, in Leviticus 18:22, and it states that man shall not sleep with man, why aren't we burning ourselves at the stake as well? Why aren't we stoning ourselves to death?
So this isn't on the bingo card, but he just had a masterful example of reductio ad absurdum by explaining that if we just follow all of these archaic rules in the Bible, that, we should, let's keep doing that. Let's follow all the stuff in the Old Testament, all these little laws, and imagine how difficult it would be to live in society under that kind of rule. So reductio ad absurdum used there. Not a fallacy, it's a debate technique. Now, some people did say that this was a straw man. So when I posted this, some people were saying, well, actually, there's a difference between moral law and ceremonial law, and that moral law would be something like, murder is bad, greed is wrong, gay marriage is wrong, and that this is a moral law, not a ceremonial law, and the stuff like eating shrimp and the different fabrics is a ceremonial law. And I did think a lot about that because I do think it's an interesting argument. However, there's a lot of moral laws in the Bible as well that not everybody follows, and it's kind of vague, and you can kind of take from it what you will. So I don't buy the argument that, the ceremonial law versus moral law has debunks his use of reductio ad absurdum here. But let's keep watching.
Do you care to address my main contention that Christ affirmed biblical marriage in the book of Matthew? And can you tell me the difference between the ceremonial, the moral, and the ritual law? And then finally, also, tell me about Christianity, the difference between the new and the old covenant, or are you just going to cherry pick certain verses of ancient Israel that do not apply to new Christianity?
No, fair. I completely agree. So we'll look at 2 points then. So firstly, if we look at the Old Testament, we can see the kind of
He also was appealing to authority by saying that this was something declared by Christ. But, Jesus said that a lot of things are wrong, like greed, lust, selfishness. All of those things are wrong, and we don't make those things illegal. In fact, a lot of those things are celebrated in our culture, even though they are against the Christian moral law. So that was definitely an appeal to authority there.
Consistencies there. We've already touched upon that, right? That makes sense. Secondly, you mentioned the point of Jesus and Christ. He never mentioned anything to do with homosexuality at all.
Well, hold on a second. No, he affirmed biblical marriage as one man and one woman. He said a man shall leave his
Romans,
right?
House. In the New Testament.
No, in Matthew. That is not correct. I believe
in the New Testament.
In the New Testament. Well, Romans is also
I also think he's cherry picking stuff out of the Bible here to support his point of view. So we're going to check that box off in the bingo card. He's cherry picking there.
In Romans 1, the Apostle Paul talks negatively about homosexuality explicitly. Also, homosexuality is repeated in the book of Titus and in the book of Jude as not being favorable, as the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Not even talking about the Old Testament verses. There are 3 types of the 613 Levitical laws, and you of course, in your own way, cherry pick some of them. We do not live under the ceremonial, we do not live under the ritual, but we do live under the moral. There's only 10 of the moral that we as Christians believe we're bound to. Some believe 9, which of course is the Decalogue. And so none of those that you mentioned we as Christians believe that we live under. However, we do look at what Christ articulated as the biblical standard of marriage. And we can also look to church tradition for this as well.
So he just caught himself up. I don't think the debater caught him on this one, but he just said that we hold ourselves to the 10 moral laws, like in the, the 10 Commandments, but gay marriage is not listed there in the 10 Commandments, so why is he on about that?
The church has had a tradition for well over 2,000 years. Even myself as a Protestant acknowledges that tradition is marriage between one man and one woman.
And fair point. But, okay, say we put aside the Old Testament for now. We'll put that aside and the inconsistencies there, and we'll look purely at the New Testament, following your rationale, okay? Now, when you say that Christ lays specifically, and the New Testament states specifically that man shall not sleep with man, I'd like to point out a linguistic error on that point.
We're going to fix that here.
I did not say that. I said the biblical marriage was affirmed, and then Romans 1 did talk negatively about the action of homosexuality.
But ultimately, that affirmation comes from 8 lines in there that suggest that man shall not sleep with man.
Yes, of course, yes. The Old Testament and New Testament harmonize one another, but Christ brought it to a different level, a different covenant, and a different moral teaching. It wasn't just enough to say that you shall, man shall strike eye for eye, so that you shall turn the other cheek, that you shall love your enemy. Christ's moral standard was much more even elevated than that of the Israelites and the Hebrews.
Well, I'm going to ask you whose Bible, okay? Now, your Bible that you use currently is written in the English language, right? Correct?
Yeah, the King James Version, yes, thanks to Tyndale.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's written in the English language, which in itself is only, say, 500 years old. Now, but the Christianity in itself, say, is 2,000 years old or even older, yeah? Correct? Now, which means that the Bible was originally written not in English, but in ancient
Koine Greek.
Huh?
In Koine Greek.
Yeah, correct. Now, if we look at the Greek terminology of man...
Yes, and Jesus spoke Aramaic. You could translate things. You acknowledge that.
Well, we translate things, but translations are linguistically ambiguous. As a former classicist, I know that language can't be translated directly. So, for example, if we look at the translation of certain words into man... So I've got 2 words here. So I've got malakoi, which means essentially soft, which isn't necessarily directly saying a gay man. And then we've got, oh God, how do I say that? Arsena koitai, which essentially means prostitutes. Now, if we look at things linguistically, we can pick apart the Bible and say that actually, it wasn't saying man shall not sleep with man, it's saying man shall not sleep with prostitutes, which is an entirely different linguistic thing.
We're really freezing and seizing up here.
Getting into Leviticus. Leviticus, though.
But no,
My contention is completely New Testament focused.
This isn't Leviticus.
What you said, man shall not speak of the man. So you're talking about Romans.
Well, okay, these words are used throughout the
Right, well,
entire
actually,
Bible
in
the
Romans
original
1, it was
text.
actually women sleeping with women. So you got your verses wrong. In Romans 1, Paul is prophesying about the end of the world. And he's saying that in the end times, woman will like with woman like, and man will, I think it might say man will like men like. You have to get the verses specifically. But it is agreed upon, and you can agree. This is why tradition is important. And I even say this as a Protestant, is that we believe that Scripture is very important, but also look to tradition. Church tradition has had an unbroken chain affirming matrimony. Holy matrimony being one man, one woman. One, even as a non-Catholic, I'm glad that Pope Leo has reaffirmed in the last couple of days. And so I'm not even sure your contention, your point. Are you saying that the Bible doesn't affirm marriage as one man, one woman?
Okay, let's see if we are even live. Are we even live here? Oh my gosh. Let's see if we are live here. Because I don't know. We might not be. This might be all for naught. Now this is live. Oh, are we now? Okay. Oh, we'll all be. We are live. Okay.
Doesn't
Good.
affirm marriage one man, one
The
woman?
Bible doesn't affirm. The Bible clearly doesn't affirm.
That is complete nonsense.
But it's not. It's a linguistic error. And it's debated.
But Christ our Lord, which is the standard, he affirms this idea that you will leave your father's home. Going back to Genesis 12 and this idea of Abraham leaving his father's home, and you will cleave to your wife. That it'll be called one. In fact, this idea of a new creation, which is something that is then used by the Apostle Paul to describe the church of Christ and the bride of the church, and the church being the bride of Christ with Jesus. So I'm not even sure your contention. It is.
But you're just avoiding my point. I'm saying the Bible that we have today is 100% a translation, and a translation
I acknowledge that.
Ambiguous.
And well, hold on. But what about specifically in Matthew or in the book of Romans? And but in order for you to be correct, you mean the church fathers translated it wrong when they were within like 50 years of this. In order for your contention to be correct, you have to say that the early church fathers that wrote the early letters to the church, they were translating it wrong, and the tradition they established was wrong. So by then we can lean on tradition and scripture. So when you get tradition plus scripture, you get something that is authentic, that is real, and that is verifiable.
I've already highlighted that tradition does not align with scripture. We've gone back thousands of years to ancient Mesopotamia.
But understand, but at the time, they all spoke Greek, they wrote Greek, and they spoke Aramaic. So, for example, when they were writing the early Gospels, the synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they were obviously writing in Greek. They knew that language. So in Matthew, when they were writing Greek, and then...
This is rough with my computer freezing. It does not like this multitasking.
And the early church fathers knew Greek and adopted that as church tradition. We have a 2,000 unbroken chain. I think you would irrefutably say that it was the teachings of Christ for one man and one woman. Because the church tradition has been unbroken for 2,000 years, and they derived it from scripture of that original language.
You can't argue that. That makes sense. I mean, if we agree to disagree, then why don't we look at biology?
So you know better than the church fathers?
No, I don't. I'm not saying I know better than the church fathers. What I'm saying is, linguistically, there is undeniably an error. Regardless of what you say, that is
our lens, maybe, but not from the people when they were making these traditions.
I agree. They may have got that right, but that may not have been their original meaning. What we're saying is the meaning has been warped over time because societal and cultural context, such as the British Empire.
Can we start bringing this question to a close, please?
It can be, but that is why tradition matters. Because the tradition, they understood the context.
Tradition is context dependent.
Well, yes and no.
More of that tradition fallacy there.
But if the tradition lasts for 2,000 years, then we look back as to how did they get to that conclusion? How did they reach that verdict? And if that verdict is in alignment with what we see in Scripture, it means that their verdict was correct in Scripture.
They never reached that verdict. As I have historically pointed out, they never reached it.
In all of the major church councils, it was very...
The modern day.
Well, no, I'm talking about in like 300 and 400 and 500. The original
Which in the scale of 2,000 years is nothing.
No, but they set this unbroken chain. We've had an unbroken chain and a course that says that marriage is one man and one woman. The church has never wavered on this.
Noted by the British Empire under British form of Christianity.
I'm talking all the way back to like 200 or 300. The idea.
So they're really repeating themselves now just on this argument. But let me know if there's anybody out there. This is one of my first time doing the live stream, so I'm not sure if you are a viewer out there. Let me know if I'm missing anything in the Kirk Fallacy bingo card here with the comments. So, like to hear thoughts.
Of biblical Christianity goes back to the early times of the church, when it was a scattered, persecuted church well before King Justinian and well before the Eastern Roman Empire, well before mass conversions. When it was a persecuted church, the church believed in one man, one woman, and because they got it from the scripture itself. Do we want to keep going, or?
Can we move on to the next question, please? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Damsith Wimalasena from Lucy Cavendish College. Thank you.
Hello, Charlie. Thank you for being here. Just before I start with my question, I wanted to address something you said earlier on sort of Western Christian values being the reason for the abolishment of slavery globally. I'm not sure whether you know this. I've seen you repeating this quite often. I'm a practicing Buddhist, and it was actually Buddhism, Buddhist emperors, Emperor Ashoka of India, who first abolished slavery globally. So I would sort of ask you to sort of look at other sort of...
I will look into that. You did it globally? They had that much, the Buddhists had that much span of influence?
Oh, within India.
Okay, I'll look into it. Thank you.
Thank you. So first of all, my first question, or my only question is, you've advocated and applauded the reducing and removing of public funding for universities on the grounds they promote ideological biases. Given that universities play a critical role in driving national innovation, research, and upward mobility, especially through federally funded grants, how do you reconcile this position with the broader societal value that higher education institutes offer?
Well, they can, but in Harvard's case, for example, who's getting their funding pulled, they have a $50 billion endowment. Just so we are clear, in pounds, that would be like what, 42 billion, 45 billion? I mean, I'm trying to learn the conversion rate here. I mean, it's an extraordinary amount of money. They can either use their endowments to fund it, and if you have certain behavior and certain practices, then you should not get federal funding. Harvard is in direct violation of the United States Supreme Court fair admissions case, which says you cannot discriminate people based on the color of their skin. Go ahead.
But isn't the whole point of it, you can't use endowments like that. The point of
they can.
The point of an endowment is to manage a fund through perpetuity. Cambridge has an endowment, and that endowment allows professorships to be funded, to allow for research into sciences. That's the whole point of an endowment.
You just said it funds research into sciences. That's what they should do with their monstrosity of an endowment.
Yeah, but the endowment is...
The interest alone on their endowment could fund the entire research and development budget of most Ivy League schools. They have a $50 billion endowment. Even like a podunk money manager in America can earn a 7 to 10% investment in the markets the last couple of years. That's $5 billion of returns that endowment could then reinvest in whatever they want. Instead, Harvard has become a hedge fund with a radical school attached. And I think that's very wrong for US taxpayers to continue to subsidize.
But it's not just Harvard. You've called on colleges being a scam. You've constantly attacked higher education institutes. You've attacked liberal arts as a scam. For example, like a lot of conservatives, Peter Thiel studied philosophy at Stanford. Ronald Reagan studied sociology. A lot of them did study liberal arts, and you keep undermining these august institutions, which have provided a lot for society. Like society's backbones have been universities and higher learning institutes, and yet you keep attacking them.
Well, they used to be largely, but again, I don't want to speak too much about this country, but in America, they don't represent fundamental American values. You know, Peter Thiel, after he graduated Stanford, wrote an entire book criticizing college and then paying people not to go to college. So Peter Thiel, who spoke at this very school, and you guys had a great conversation with him, do you know that he believes college is such a scam? He would pay people $100,000 a year for 20 years straight not to go to college. So not exactly a good argument in your favor. Peter Thiel, who got a philosophy degree, made billions of dollars, and has now forked over tens of millions of dollars for people not to go to US universities and colleges.
Yeah, but it's not just Peter Thiel.
I know, but you mentioned him, I didn't. But to complete the point is that...
Thomas went to, did liberal arts.
Look, in America, there are far too many people going to college. We need people to become welders, electricians, people that work with their hands. There is a major trade deficit problem in the United States. We have 11 million well-paying jobs that we cannot find enough labor for, and instead we have a lot of people going to university to go study North African lesbian poetry. It might sound good, but it doesn't necessarily, A, either development, the content, the character, or the development of the soul, and B, it does not necessarily also give you the skills necessary. Some college is good for you. I'm a big proponent of Hillsdale College.
Guys, can you please be quiet?
I believe Hillsdale College is America's greatest college, and I'm a big proponent of that. But I would ask a question. In your own words, what do you believe the purpose of college is?
It's critical engagement. But coming back to your point on lesbian poetry or whatever.
North African lesbian poetry.
North African lesbian poetry. So in the morning, I actually had a lecture on development policy. And one of the key authors on sort of development economics is Nussbaum, who talks about how liberal arts sort of engages you critically. And one could argue, even North African lesbian poetry, I don't think that's a degree. I think that's just a module within a degree.
So that right there is a straw man, because he's talking about North African lesbian poetry, which is not a thing. I looked into it. There's no such thing as a degree in North African lesbian poetry. It might be like within, there might be like a poetry kind of degree, or like North African like literature or gender studies or women's studies, but that specifically is definitely not a degree.
Maybe.
Yeah. That makes you.
The fact you don't know shows how rotten to the core universities have become.
You're taking one example and telling conservatives and hordes of young people that college is a scam. College isn't a scam. I mean, I took my mum down to a pub just down the road where Watson and Crick announced DNA.
Guys, can we, okay, wait 1 second.
If college is a scam, then DNA wouldn't have been discovered. With cancer research.
Yes, hold on a second. Yes, you're right. At this specific university, you guys split the atom. You had Sir Isaac Newton. You had some of the greatest minds of the West. I don't know about what's happening here, and I'm not going to criticize it. But at most colleges in the West, they've gone away from places of inquiry and appreciation of what is good and what is beautiful, and into this incessant oppression Olympics of trying to deconstruct the core canon that is our birth certificate. I don't know if that's happening here. It's certainly...
That's not true, though.
In America, it is objectively true, okay?
That isn't true.
Again, no, first of all, they removed Western civilization as a core course in Stanford in the 1990s. They tried to bring it back with petitions, and the university said, no, teaching Western civilization is racist. Shakespeare is not taught at major... let me finish. Shakespeare is not taught at major universities across America because it's deemed as racist. I talked to some students earlier in the English department, and they said, hey, I'm studying Shakespeare. I said, that's refreshing, because in a lot of U.S. schools, they don't teach Shakespeare because he's called racist. You would be surprised at how wretched to the core some of these colleges have become in America.
If you look at the Global Innovation Index...
By the way, this isn't a logical fallacy, but that's flat out not true that they do not teach Shakespeare in U.S. schools. It might be true that it's not taught as much as it used to be. It's certainly not as much as in England, but it's still taught in U.S. schools, so that's just wrong.
America, which is predominantly, a lot of their majors are in humanities and liberal arts. They're number 2 on the Global Innovation Index. China is somewhere near 13. If you look at every metric, Fortune 1000 CEOs, 40% did humanities and liberal arts. There is a value in liberal arts, yet you're criticizing it.
Yes, and I'm going to keep on criticizing it. Also, the vast majority of liberal arts graduates do not respect freedom of speech. That is an empirical poll. They increasingly do not have reverence or gratitude for the United States of America. They don't care about the core values of the U.S. Constitution. If you want to go to college, that's fine. But in our country, 40% of kids that enter college do not graduate. The kids that do graduate, half of them end up getting jobs that do not require any sort of college degree. There are all these made-up degrees. In America, I know it's different than the experience you might be having here. Your tutoring system here is objectively great. I'm glad you guys have it. The class sizes in America are 400 to 500 students, sometimes per introductory course, to go hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt.
Okay, so he's just saying that the class size in America is like several hundred students per class. Well, I've been a teacher for 10 years, for like 12 plus years now, and I've never had a bigger class than like 35, maybe 40 people. I think it's the biggest class size I've ever had. Most of my classes are like 20, 25, if even that. So, you know, some courses are like big lecture halls where, you know, it's mainly like a teacher talking to the class, and my class is more interactive. And a lot of classes, even I was in college for like, 6 to 8 years, because I went part-time for community college on and off for like 4 or 5 years. I don't think I ever had a class with more than, maybe I had a lecture class with like 100 people, but even then most classes I would say, I don't even think I had a class with 100 people. I don't think I ever had a class with more than like 40 people. I think every class I ever had was like 20 people. So I don't know where he's getting that from.
Study things that don't matter to find jobs that do not exist. And so let me just make one final point, is that
That was another straw man.
some people should be going to college, but generally in the United States of America, it has become a racket of debt, it has become a burden, and a place where we're actually not putting our best and brightest into the job field itself to be equipped for the jobs of the future. Instead, we have a lot of baristas at Starbucks with philosophy degrees.
You also mentioned indoctrination. As per the Oxford Dictionary's definition of indoctrination, it means that you take a belief and you can't critically observe that belief.
I'm going to say that's a hasty generalization too. He's picking out one example and saying that all things. So he's saying that just because somebody might work at Starbucks with a philosophy degree, which seems odd, that all degrees are wrong. So that's like an unnecessary hasty generalization that he's making there. It's like a stereotype of college degree earners working at Starbucks and getting a degree in philosophy. So that's not most students. So hasty generalization.
Turning Point USA has over 30,000 chapters, 3,000 chapters across US universities. So are you arguing that students, including conservatives, lack the critical thinking skills to sort of decide political ideologies, political beliefs, that they're so dumbfounded that they can't decide for themselves what's right and what's wrong, and that your whole premise is on the fact that students like us, we lack critical thought in deciding what is taught in school.
Got a comment here. You love this man. You love Charlie Kirk?
Cambridge as the school that I think
or you love the debater?
In America, we have
Oof, boy.
of people that go to these
Who do you
massive
love?
state schools that have humanities departments that are not reading the great books, that do not have a tutoring system, that are unfortunately laced with the most anti-Western thought imaginable. I don't really quite following what one thing has to do with
Still
the other.
there, Oof
3,000
boy?
chapters has something to do with your
Do you like Charlie Kirk or the debater?
I think we're out of time.
You can clarify, but then we'll move on.
In general, colleges should be a place that lift you up to what is good, true, and beautiful. To study the great things that have been, to develop your soul and develop your character. Character in Greek literally means like tattoo, to etch within you. Far too often, colleges create ungrateful, pessimistic, and nihilistic revolutionaries that want to tear down.
He's so performative and dramatic the way he's talking right now. So colleges are horrible. Let's see, is that another fallacy here? I think he's just kind of making a big deal of nothing and appealing to fear here.
What was before, and instead have no alternative to build the future, and the West is suffering because of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was a slippery slope too. He's saying the West is suffering because people are going to college and not learning things. That doesn't make sense. So he's saying that the West is suffering because people are going to college. So that was a wild, slippery slope argument there. And I hope I have slippery slope. Oh yeah, of course I do. Here it is.
Disagree, but thank you very much.
So slippery slope is when you say that just because we do one thing wrong, then all of these horrible unintended consequences are going to follow surely afterwards. And he's seeming to imply that if everybody goes to college, then that's going to like be some horrible thing for Western civilization. So that's why it's a slippery slope there. We're almost at the bingo now.
Thank you. Our next question is from Archie McIntosh at Jesus College.
At Jesus College.
It's good to meet you, Charlie. I hope you can understand first rule. I'm a little nervous. There's a very real chance I could wake up tomorrow, front page of YouTube. Charlie Kirk owns man bun idiot with facts and logic. So
Destroys.
Yeah, destroys. Okay, so my question is, I agree that stable monogamous relationships often produce the best outcomes for society, but if that structure really works for everyone, why do we consistently see societies, once they become safer and more prosperous, move away from traditional monogamy? And why do so many marriages still end in divorce, even among people who generally try to make it work? And just one final framing there. If you believe in free markets because they are decentralized and they adapt to reality without top-down control, Given the individual ability to form healthy long-term pair bonds vary significantly with factors like genetics and ecologically calibrated attachment styles, why do you reject top-down control in economics, but not extend that same rejection to human behavior in terms of marriage?
Okay, so the first one, the second law of thermodynamics answers your question, is that it's the law of decay. Societies tend to decay against the roots that created them. For example, as a side note, here in this country, you guys invented the idea of free speech. You brought it to the world. You guys do not have free speech in this country anymore. 30 people a day are arrested in the UK for inflammatory social media posts. Someone by the name of Lucy Connolly is currently facing prison time for a Facebook post that was critical of migrants. It is normal, unfortunately, for civilizations to get away from how they once operated and how they once were. Now, to your question, does that answer the first part of your question? You were saying, why do they get away from monogamy?
So right there, he is equivocating. He's asked about like the traditional nuclear family, and he goes on this whole rant about free speech in England. So he's going on a red herring. He's talking about all these other things. So I'm going to knock out 2 logical fallacies with that one.
I want to make sure I'm answering your question.
I would say I don't feel that that's a full answer.
Okay, so you're asking why do they get away from what works? Is that correct?
Yes. Well, why do societies make this change once they become more prosperous?
Oh yeah, okay. I mean, because prosperity leads to degeneracy, for sure. That would be the answer. Yes. And so once you are...
That's also a slippery slope fallacy, that prosperity leads to degeneracy. I mean, what does that even mean?
Prosperous, you tend to no longer have the moral guardrails or the limitations. Let's just say...
He equivocated when he was asked about the traditional family, and he started talking about free speech in England. That was a red herring. Whataboutism, equivocation, those are all similar logical fallacies.
You no longer have delayed gratification because you have instant gratification because you have a surplus of goods, and then you have a decline of a transcendent moral order. The second part of the question, can you remind me, please, what the second question was? About markets?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, for example, I believe in intervention in markets if there is something that is improper morally. So, for example, I do not believe that you should be able to scam your neighbor or have misleading advertising because I believe in a transcendent moral standard, and the same goes for my personal views on marriage.
Okay, so I think we largely agree on the foundation. I'd like to propose something that you might like to think about. So, firstly, I absolutely acknowledge that, again, if everyone in society was able to maintain healthy long-term pair bonds, that would be best. Again, there's strong data showing that independent of socioeconomic factors, broken homes are some of the strongest predictors of poor life outcomes.
We totally agree.
Yes. And even, I'm not sure if many people here are aware of this, but if you track, as countries become more socially egalitarian, somewhat surprisingly, rates of female depression and anxiety also spike disproportionately. So I think one of the problems here is that when you try and impose moral absolutism, inevitably, again, due to variance in attachment issues, due to industrialized culture, absent parents, screens, raising kids, around 50% of adults in the West develop attachment disorders, which make it very difficult to maintain long-term pair bonds. And then additionally, you have things like variation in oxytocin receptors, in density and shape, also in vasopressin. There are going to be, even if there's 5% of people who feel that these rules really do not fit them, they will push back. And this will create ideologies that then grow into more wider appealing ideologies, which then, leads to this change. I think this is what happened in the sexual revolution. It started with a push for female autonomy, and then it was almost morphed into a really exaggerated expression of pushing for maximizing individual freedom. And I think that when you try and impose moral absolutism this way, it just inevitably causes pushback. And I think if you were to, as someone with a platform, instead say, hey, monogamy is great, it works best for most people, but I also understand there are some people it doesn't work so well for, more people would hear the message that you want to push.
Okay, thank you for that. That's an interesting. I've actually never gotten that question before. It's very thoughtful. Would you say you're against moral absolutism then?
Yes, I would.
Are you against that absolutely?
No, I'm very open to having my mind changed, and
so it's not an absolute thing.
Well, I'm against moral absolutism.
Are you against moral absolutism? Absolutely.
No.
Okay, so then you're consistent. So
I think
it's all just kind of. I think it's preference, not. It's about preference, and you could just basically do whatever you prefer. There is no transcendent moral order.
Well, I think what you're doing, though, is slightly unfairly putting me into a loop, because I'm very open to having my mind changed.
No, that's fine. What I'm saying, though, is that by definitionally, and this is something that will keep on coming back, you must choose what moral standard we live by. I'm very clear as to what moral standard. The lie of the West, of modernity, the last 30 years, is that we're going to have you live and let live, and there will be no moral standard. That itself is a moral standard, and it's a really bad one. And to your point, that yes, it creates more suffering, it creates more despair. And no, I disagree with what you say, and I respect the heart of which you're saying it. I will say that I have a moral obligation not to accommodate when people fall short, but instead try to lift them up towards the standard that is true and that I know that works.
So where I'd push this is I'd ask you, you describe people falling short when they fail to engage in long-term monogamy. What do you think causes that? Why do you think some people struggle?
Many reasons. Economic is one of them, but the biggest is the death of religion and the death of Christianity in the West. As America, I'll just talk about America. The UK is unfortunately far less churched than America, but as America has become less churched, so many of these social ills rise.
So one thing I'd say, I study the...
So he's basically saying that the breakdown of the family is happening because of the reduced religion and church in people's lives. So that's going to be a false cause, meaning he's misattributing certain problems in society due to a lack of religion when it's could obviously be attributed to other factors like economic challenges, other social issues that might be going on. There might be many factors. Technology is making it very difficult for families to, function properly. So by attributing to a lack of church, that would make it a fallacy of a false cause.
Behavior, in particular sexual romantic behavior. If you track all the different hunter-gatherer cultures that we can study, and if we track how agriculture shapes things, you see that ecological conditions really reliably predict the prevalence of monogamy, certain marriage systems. And what I think is what we refer to as attachment issues. They seem to be an ecological calibration to an environment. In environments that are more unstable, it's less optimal for an individual to grow up with a tendency to rely on long-term pair bonds. And I think there's a mismatch with the modern world, again, coming back to industrialization. There are so many people who raise kids as absent parents. Daycare is massively linked to attachment issues. This then causes people to struggle to bond long-term. And then again, coming back to the genetic part, there's again real research showing that especially vasopressin mutations and oxytocin mutations, some people really just do not have the proclivity for this.
What brings stability? Because you say stability is a good thing, and what would bring stability?
So first of all, I would say we had what you might consider stability in the previous century, and then it became unstable.
We're speeding it up here.
Why?
I'm saying because moral absolutism was imposed.
Moral absolutism was lost. You see, modernity rose. We started to teach our kids moral relativism, and we got rid of moral absolutes. So it's the opposite.
So why was it lost? Was it lost because people stopped pushing for top down?
Why was it lost? That's a question for far smarter minds. I can only tell you that it was. In America, it's honestly one of the worst decisions, not the worst ideas ever, which is modern feminism, largely from Betty Friedan's feminist mystique, which acted as if every woman who's in a monogamous marriage in the States is in some sort of tyrannical environment. And it has led to the women of the West being the most miserable, most depressed, most suicidal, most prescription drug addicted.
Oh, did I totally miss that we got a bingo? When did we get that? I'm gonna have to rewind, figure out when we got the first bingo here. So we're gonna keep going though, of course, because we're not even done. We got bingo multiple ways now, up and across here, and I didn't even, nobody shouted bingo. So there we go. We got a couple bingos here, but we're gonna keep going here.
And that it's okay, in fact, it's courageous to get married and have children again. I think it would solve a lot of our problems.
Well, I've been told to.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Tilly Middlehurst at Fitzwilliam College.
There we go.
So I'm a feminist. My question is about the role of women, though. What should women's role in public and private life look like, and what are the material benefits of that?
Well, thank you for that. Can I take it? I don't even want to take this detour, but can we both agree on what a woman is?
Yes. An adult human female is a biological state of being that is also socially experienced. Can I please elucidate just one example of that social experience?
Yeah, I was going to answer your question, but sure, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So let's say you're a member of a tribe, and in that tribe, you have the biological female anatomy, and in order to become a woman in that tribe, you have to also get a tattoo. That's
Unnecessary mic drop. I missed it before, but there we go.
Experience that's mapped onto biological reality.
So can a woman have a prostate?
Can a woman have a prostate? Biologically speaking, a woman is an adult human female that has a biological reality, but it's also social experience, right? So I don't...
It's super easy. Can a woman have a prostate?
So as per my definition of woman, I would say that people who have a prostate are biologically male, but they can sometimes be socially treated as women.
Okay, got it. So women can have prostates. Got it. Okay. So you're a feminist that actually isn't just fighting for women, you're also fighting for men.
So yes, men also experience harms from patriarchy, but I argue...
We're talking about the same feminist.
He's also, I'm going to say that he's pointing out, a false dichotomy here by saying what is a woman? It's either this or that. So if you have to, paint something with a broad stroke, just saying it's either like black or white, it's one thing or another, that's a false dichotomy, which is what he does with gender. So there's another fallacy. We're going to we're playing blackout bingo, by the way. That's why I failed to get excited when we had the one, both way bingo here. We're going to try and see if we can shade out all the squares.
Domination, but I would argue that those harms come from that system of domination itself. In the same way, for example, this isn't a threat, but if I reached across and punched you in the face, then my hand might hurt, right? So are we understanding that there are patterns of power? So I would also fight for the rights of men as a feminist, just as I would fight for the rights of women.
Sure. You think women are happier than they were 40 years ago?
I think I would have a few responses to that. I think that women report more stress and dissatisfaction today because, not because they have more rights or because of feminism, but because they're under dual pressure to both excel professionally and also because of the domestic labor in homes that is structured around outdated expectations. So for example, studies like the OECD's Better Life Index show that women's life expectancy, education levels, professional achievements have risen in countries with higher gender inequality. So I would argue that what you're calling unhappiness is actually visibility, because now we hear women expressing dissatisfaction, whereas in the 50s we prescribed them Valium and we lobotomized.
Yeah. That's really rich. I didn't know women not to complain 50 years ago. That's funny. Hold on a second. Why are suicide rates going up more for women?
I think that.
So again, that's another false cause. He's talking about the rise in self-harm rates in women as being caused by feminism, which is a false cause. So there's so many issues: technology, media representation, economic issues, urbanization of cities that makes people more isolated and lonely. There's all more access to firearms and drug prescriptions, opioid epidemic, so many reasons for, social ills, which he's blaming here, which is funny because before he said because it was the loss of church and religion that's causing these social ills. Now he's kind of moving the goalpost here and saying that it's because of feminism that we have all these issues.
Complaining materially, women are killing themselves more. Why is that?
I think that even if both men and women have become unhappier, men's suicide rates have risen as well, and that's also been exponential. Can you at least concede that feminism offers only one potential explanation? There could be also other explanations.
Of course, obviously, but feminism is the glaring thing in front of us, where we have fertility rates down, we have marriage rates down, we have unhappiness up, and we did something in the 1960s out of the universities of Brady Friedan and Gloria Steinem and all these feminists that basically said you're trapped in a home, go get a job, freeze your eggs, take birth control, and all of a sudden women are way unhappier than they were 40 years ago. And I just have to ask the question, why is that? Is it working? And maybe there are biological differences between men and women that we should respect, and that deep down a lot of women want to get married and have children. In fact, we should applaud it, and we should support it, and we should say it means nothing if you're going to go be a CEO of some shoe company or be some banker in London. What matters if you raise children and you have something to pass down long after you're gone.
I think I would bring 2 points to that. The first one is just really simple, which is that you can ascribe liberalism all you want as the cause of the unhappiness. I would argue something else. I would say that it's certain economic policy that has very little to do with the.
By the way, George Washington never had any biological children. FYI. The more you know.
Alternative lifestyles. I would say that we can recognize that income inequality across a vast swathe of Western countries has increased, which causes all kinds of social ills, a lack of social cohesion, housing price growth doesn't correspond with wage growth, monopolies increasingly become kind of emboldened to interfere with politics, and monopolies don't prioritize social health either. I think that those offer more compelling reasons for a decline in happiness than an increase in freedoms, because just one more thing, on an intuitive basis, generally speaking, people want more freedom, not less.
Okay, so if that's true, why is it, do you agree that the happiest women in the West are married with kids?
I would have to look into it, but I think there are certain
and objectively we know that, right? The women with kids are not the ones tearing down statues, right? They're the ones that actually have obligations.
Does tearing down statues correspond to some kind of smiles per capita data set that I wasn't aware of?
Again, it's a little bit of a...
That's not true, by the way.
The happy and the grateful.
What he's saying right now.
The happy and the grateful usually don't go burn down Wendy's in their spare time, which we saw in our country all throughout a single summer. But as a side note, you would agree, objectively, study after study, survey after survey, that the women of the West that are married and have children, especially a lot of children, are far happier than even the ones that earn more money correlated at the same age.
So I also don't think...
So what he's saying is not true. I've looked it up post this debate. There's mixed evidence on it. It's really difficult, if not impossible, to do proper research on this specific claim that he's making. But certainly not undeniably true what he's trying to say.
Is a very good metric, and neither do you, because you think gay people shouldn't just pursue happiness by being gay. They have other moralistic considerations to be making. So I don't think smiles per capita is a particularly convincing way to measure whether or not we should encourage women to be autonomous. I think we should maximize agency within a fair system that has reasonable parameters because it's expedient, it's good for the economy, it's logical, it's the moral thing, because if we can't prove the material harms, we shouldn't discourage it. And also self-reported studies is a really flawed way to do psychology. It's the week before my university exams right now, and I'm standing here explaining the basic methodology of a kind of survey collection in sociology, which you don't even think is a real subject, to Charlie Kirk. If I took one of those surveys right now, I'd check extremely miserable, but so would a Palestinian child who's been taunted to smithereens. How are we going to measure
extremely miserable?
No, I'm kind of making a joke.
No, I mean, but seriously, but hold on. I mean, that's an important point, though, is that the women in the West have it the best in the world, and yet they're way unhappier than women of sub-Saharan Africa. There's something fundamentally wrong here, because the women of sub-Saharan Africa have something that a lot of women in the West do not have. The women in the West have cats, and they have good jobs, and the women of sub-Saharan Africa, they have a belief in the divine, and they have kids. And maybe there's a biological undercurrent that is keeping a lot of women from realizing their full potential. And so without reading your phone and just connecting.
I'm not really reading my phone.
Well, it's fine, sure, then you can answer without it. Fair enough. Would you agree that it's a good thing that more women get married and have children in the West?
I would ask you, would you say that a sub-Saharan African woman who's experienced female genital mutilation and checks extremely happy in a survey, and I also would check extremely happy in a survey, who do you think would be objectively more happy, even if they both check the same answer?
Okay, so if you want to talk about how Islam mistreats women, we could talk all day long.
I'm going to say he delivered an ad hominem attack by criticizing her for looking at her phone. I mean, maybe it's a fair criticism, but I'm going to say that's an ad hominem because he's attacking, something about her versus her argument.
I'm all for that.
Me too.
Okay, good. So we agree.
Absolutely.
We actually
We agree on many things.
We should shut off Muslim immigration to the UK, right? We totally agree.
I think that all religious fundamentalism is bad, and if you take that logic, we should also not allow evangelical Christians into the UK
Okay,
either.
hold on a second. Hold on. That's funny.
There was a viral clip there. I think that was probably the most viral clip from this whole debate. It got tons of millions of views in, all different times that it was clips. I even did a reaction video that garnered way more views than I had ever imagined with that specific clip because she used a debate technique called turning the tables using his logic against him, saying that, oh, Muslims, bad, we should ban them. And her saying, oh yeah, you think that religious fundamentalism is bad? Maybe we should ban fundamental religious people, such as evangelical Christians. Take that, Charlie Kirk.
Can you show me what would your example, because I have 50, of a single Christian country that you would say mistreats women, right?
America.
Oh, really?
Yes.
We have a female woman vice president.
That was a pretty good burn, by the way, saying that America mistreats women in this day and age, which is true, which Charlie Kirk seemed to be very taken aback by.
Vice president, a female speaker of the House, women earn more than men in America.
In Rwanda, female
Women do not earn more than men in America. Where is he getting this from? Show me one study where that happens.
representation in government supersedes the UK by quite a lot. Do women get treated better in Rwanda?
Okay, I might be super off this. Like, is Rwanda Islamic? Like, I'm not totally sure. I don't think it is. Like, is it? Like, I don't know, actually. It's not. So, again, we were just talking about Islam as a little bit of a side note, but you must be morally clear, because you brought up female genital mutilation, which is a teaching of the Islamic faith. But as a side note, like, again, this is very important, which is, I'm not here to require you to do anything or not. I'm making a simple observation, which is objectively true regardless. The women of the West are miserable, and they're miserable for a reason, because we've told them to suppress how they are made by God and pursue something else and get a bunch of trinkets and get a bunch of promotions, and they end up at 38 years old with a big flat in London, and they're miserable. And we should tell them to stop freezing their eggs and start finding their partner earlier and have lots of babies.
Yeah, okay, I think I'd bring two just final points to this. First one is just really intuitive, right, which is that if you actually care about women's happiness, then the solution is to structurally support them. That means universal childcare, shared legally enforceable parental leave, and in Nordic countries where women have high workforce participation and also some state support, they report higher life satisfaction than in more conservative countries, including America. So if your metric is happiness,
satisfaction surveys. You told me they're BS.
So are satisfaction surveys bullshit or not? Because you told me
do you acknowledge satisfaction surveys or not? You just told me that they're BS. Do you think they're objective? That we can use that as data?
I don't think that
yes or no?
it's the only sole data set, but it's a data set that
you told me there's a flawed and you self-report. Okay, by the macro self-satisfaction data, I'm correct. And you are right. When you have paid family leave, you are happier. I'm actually a proponent of that. At Turning Point USA, we pay for 6 months when somebody has a child. I think there's a lot of agreement we can have on that. We need to encourage having more children. I think the Hungarian child policy is phenomenal. We should look at that, because the greatest thing that is plaguing the West is we're not having enough kids. And it's not just bad because we won't have a future, it's also bad because the present is awfully miserable for too many women as well.
Okay, in which case I think we get...
Do I start bringing this to a close, please?
Okay, I think just one final thing, which is that in which case we get to a really interesting argument about what parts of womanhood can be demarcated to the social and what kinds of womanhood can be demarcated to the biological. So, for example, my anatomy is demarcated to the biological. But the fact that I might potentially be a better nurturer than a man, I would demarcate that to the social, you might demarcate that to the biological, in which case we have differing moral scales of value. I would ask why we should necessarily prioritize your moral scale of value, which prioritizes things like the birth rate, when in actual fact there are various other moral scales of value. And if you yourself are a free market American, why is it the case that you would not, like the previous speaker noted, extend personal freedoms towards all spheres, including a private sphere?
I believe in absolute truth claims, and it's absolutely wrong and bad when a society stops having kids to replace their own population, and then you have to import the third world and you become the third world. It's bad.
I disagree, but thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And the final question that we've got time for today is from Sammy McDonald from St John's College.
Good evening, Mr. Kirk. You've obviously devoted a lot of your life to electing, keeping in power Donald Trump, and you did
I feel like they saved the best for last here.
And take them out of foreign conflicts. Should we see how that is going at the moment? Currently, Trump has just accepted a $400 million debt from Qatar, which we're assured is perfectly above board. Billions in arms are going to Saudi Arabia, which they're using to bomb and starve Yemeni children. Not sure how that's in the interest of the United States, but it might be in the interest of the $5.5 billion deal his failed sons are receiving. At the same time, this great president of peace has greenlit mass killings not just in Yemen, but in Gaza, where he greenlit an invasion called Operation Gideon's Chariot, with the express aim of wiping out the Gazan population. You promised to put America first. Haven't you and your ilk
That comes in pretty hot.
No. Well, I'm glad you have great intellectual substance and can answer. Because it's all the culture wars to you, isn't it? The second someone actually tells you what you're doing, which you just read.
Can you calm down a little bit? Like, just a little bit? Pounding the table, you're all over the place. No. You want me to go piece by piece? Or would you like me to talk slower?
I think you can.
Number one, Donald Trump is convening a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. Joe Biden gave
that's going well, isn't it?
It's going well. Can you not interrupt me? Well. I allowed you to talk uninterrupted.
You're famous for not interrupting.
So it's kind of an ad hominem attack there.
Can I speak?
Oh, he's definitely interrupting. We're going to check that off the box there.
Interrupted, actually? He is convening a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. I believe we will see an end to that war. Number two, he's actually talking to Iran and discouraging Israel to strike the interior of Iran, and has stopped many other international countries to do the same. Number three, can you give him credit for ending the Indian-Pakistan war?
Both of them said he didn't do that.
Well, hold on a second.
Let's go back.
No, that's
Russia, Ukraine.
Hold on, that's important.
Can I speak now?
Yes, but the Indian-Pakistan thing, you got to go deeper than that.
Let's go in order. Is a peace summit where the main person in question, Russia, doesn't show up, is that a success, Mr. Kirk?
Well, I'm not even sure.
No success.
Well, again, these are ongoing negotiations, and it's a lot better than when your Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, went alongside our Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, to Istanbul and unnecessarily blew up a potential Russian peace deal, which has resulted in hundreds of thousands of dead Ukrainians, one of the great unnecessary wars of the modern era. Donald Trump believes in conversation and police boot through strength. He has been president for well over 120 to 130 days, and he has already ended a war between two nuclear conflicts of India-Pakistan. He has secured our own U.S. southern border while we were being invaded by foreign powers. And thirdly, he is brokering a potential settlement with Iran that will prevent a major escalation in the Middle East. And finally, it is very difficult, but I believe they'll get it done, that will finally see an end to the Russian-Ukrainian war.
I'm just going to disregard the enormous lies you just put out there about Russia and Ukraine. But do you really...
Okay, so spouting off a fire hose of lies is considered a Gish gallop, named after, I believe, a creationist who would just spout off all kinds of crazy arguments all at once. And because of that, it's difficult to respond when somebody throws out 10 points at you once, and it's like, how do you even know how to respond to them? If somebody says 10 things that are wrong to you at once, how do you respond? Well, that's called the Gish gallop, or fire hose of lies method, in a debate or conversation setting. And Mehdi Hasan, he has a great way to combat this. He says that number one, you have to call it out. You have to pick out the first thing or the most important thing that somebody says that's a lie, and you call it out. You don't back down. You keep at it. You don't move past it until everybody understands that one thing he said is a lie. You focus on that you single that one thing out. So that's Mehdi Hasan's method of calling out the Gish gallop. So the Gish gallop, technically not a logical fallacy, but it still is a relevant method that people use to argue something in a way that's not based on substance.
Think
Let's keep going.
Negotiations work if you cut off all your leverage and scream at one party in the Oval Office? Don't you think that has just emboldened Russia? Because look at the approach. Putin thinks so much of your glorious president, he can't even be asked to show up. You have elected, or help elect, somebody who is at best an idiot and at worst is deeply corrupt.
Okay, again, so Trump and Putin had a 2-hour phone call today. You'll acknowledge that's a good thing. The pursuit of peace can sometimes be a winding road, and it's a lot better than sending hundreds of billions of dollars further into the killing fields of eastern Ukraine, something that tragically both the UK government and the US government has been unnecessarily supporting for a couple of years. President Trump wants to see a brokerage, an ending of the settlement. I pray we can get it. It's very complicated because of the mess that Joe Biden left, which was an active kinetic war with a nuclear power sending American-made missiles into the interior of Russia. So President Trump has already ended a war. He's ended an invasion. He's only 130 days into this, and I believe we do not know. At this point, we are merely speculating, but I think we should not spend our time doing that because eventually one of us will be right. I believe we'll be right. I believe we'll see an end to this war.
Can we just talk about 100 billions worth of weapons? Because you dodged my question on what was going on in the Middle East, where Trump has just signed enormous arms contracts with Saudi Arabia and with Qatar. And I noticed you ignored the fact that this might have had anything to do with the blatant corruption going on through the Trump coin and going on through giving the very competent sons of Donald Trump billions of investment from Saudi Arabia and Qatar. This is something that is directly embroiling Americans into conflict, but is importantly killing many innocent people. Those nations have been known to terrorize innocent civilian populations. So if you're coming to me and you're objecting to America selling weaponry, why are you defending shilling for the Saudis?
Well, hold on. One is sending weaponry, one is purchasing. Secondly, you do know that the biggest purchase that was announced was commercial airliner, 737, $100 billion. You've heard of Qatar Airways. They purchased $100 billion of commercial airways. You are right, there were some weapons contracts, but I guess the question is, would you rather have Saudi Arabia buy weapons from America or China?
I'd rather they not have American weaponry at cut price rates.
This is kind of like a sunken cost fallacy, like, oh, well, they bought an airliner, so if they're giving an airliner to the United States, then Donald Trump may as well take it, because why not? So let's just say that's a sunken cost fallacy.
Okay, fine. You mentioned Qatar.
Sunken cost fallacy.
And the evils of Hamas. Can I ask you, who's the main funder of Hamas?
Well, the Palestine. Well, the West
A
actually
little
funds
hop in
Hamas.
his step.
Well, Iran funds.
No. Where are the Hamas leaders?
And also Qatar funds Hamas. It is a combination of
Is this a state which
international
have a
organizations.
$400 million jet with the President of the United States on it?
Hold on. First of all, it was not given to him personally. I understand the optics of it, but it was not given to him personally. It was given to the U.S. government. And under that standard, no U.S. government should ever receive any gifts from any foreign countries whatsoever. It's not given to him personally and not a violation of the.
Why is he trying to transfer it to his personal library? He is.
Actually, okay, again, he sent out a statement. This is way too in the weeds. We want to keep on going it. We can.
It's fundamental moral principle.
Okay, so under that fundamental moral principle, then, can you acknowledge, though, that President Trump is getting more done in a less period of time than any president we've seen, while our prior president did not even know what year he got elected? You understand the contrast here?
What aboutism again? I'm not a defender of Biden.
No, I'm not saying President Trump is far better
You
than
have to defend the person you spent millions on.
I will defend every day of someone who ends an invasion.
That's all you do.
Brings down the price of oil, who is revitalizing the American economy, who's brokering peace, who stopped the potential nuclear war, who is bringing Iran to the table and bringing Russia to the table, someone who does not want armed conflicts with the greatest powers of our time. I will defend that endlessly.
You are living in a fantasy world of your own creation. So it's quite hard to engage with that.
And then disprove
but let's check on how Trump is doing in terms of diplomacy. Look, with the war in the Middle East, do you think it was a defensible decision to tell the Israelis you wanted Trump Gaza to agree for Israel to invade the Gaza Strip and to continue to murder thousands of innocent children and civilians in a pointless war? Is that in America's interest? Is that in humanity's?
Well, first of all, you should know something about Trump. There's something, you realize with Trump over the last 10 years, he is quite the social media user and uses hyperbolic language at times. But let me ask you, in the conflict of Israel versus Hamas, who's the good guy?
I believe both Hamas and the Israeli government are evil, but I think also...
Again, this is a false dichotomy here.
There is no justification for the murder and mutilation of thousands of innocent people and children, but like the futile... There is no justification, Mr. Kirk.
I like seeing this guy hopping around though.
Bombing innocent populations and dragging out a war which is damaging Israel.
That's a
and the West.
secret,
You've made that point.
secret debate technique. Hop around.
It was also moral truth that the war started because 1,300 Jews were killed and 200 were taken hostage. And when you declare war on Israel, expect a firestorm in reaction. Let me finish, I let you talk. Israel had its holiest day of the calendar year besides Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, Samat Torah, the 50-year anniversary of the Six-Day War. On Shabbat, Hamas invaded Israel, deciding to go recklessly to music concerts, to homes, to kibbutzes, and taking 200-plus hostages. They knew what they were doing. In one of the most cloistered urban environments on the planet, 2 million people live in a place where it's impossible to wage war. Impossible. Where they wear civilian clothing, they violate every tenet of the Geneva Convention, and the IDF, when they do something right, they get no credit. When they do life-saving surgeries of a Gazan child, they get no credit. When they drop leaflets, they get no credit. But when they happen to bomb a place where they're operating their military from, which we now know from third-party verified sources, hundreds of Hamas military operations are in mosques, schools, and hospitals. I'm sorry, the country where they were living in relative peace on October 6th, that all of a sudden we had a war, and Hamas started the war. And I don't see people that were really upset about the 2 million Germans that were killed in World War II, civilians. A tragic truth of war is that civilians die. I don't like it, and you don't like it. And they brought it upon themselves. The only operation and entity to blame is the leadership of Hamas, not the Israeli government, for fighting this defensive war after they were invaded.
I'm no defender of the terrible pogrom that was launched against Jews on that day. But the justification for the death of innocents cannot be an infinite cycle of bloodlust. It cannot be killing tens of thousands.
I'm going to say this is a tu quoque, which is like saying, I think it's like you another in Latin. I'm forgetting the Latin term right now, the meaning of it, but it's like saying, well, you did something bad, so then our doing of something bad is justified. So in this case, like Israel and Hamas, like Hamas did something bad, so that justifies what Israel is doing. That's an example of tu quoque.
Thousands of innocent civilians with a war with no end in sight, people who were not complicit in those atrocities. It cannot be bombing hospitals which children use. It cannot be bombing hospitals in which cancer patients are dying and starving in there. The deaths that have been inflicted, nobody knows the true toll, but somewhere between 50 and 100,000 people lie dead under the rubble. And what is left for Gaza except for to continue to suffer under Hamas? Because it turns out Netanyahu's political strategy has not worked. It has entrenched Hamas within the territories. To be a Christian, I would have thought, Mr. Kirk, would never have involved suggesting that the price for an atrocity must be an infinite cycle of bloodlust, that innocent people and the young population must be killed to avenge some kind of providential price. How can you call yourself a Christian? Well, you just did.
I want to make sure we get our moral clarity straight before we proceed. No one likes what's happening in Gaza. No one with a heart or a soul or a mind likes when kids die. But you must understand who started the conflict so that you can end it correctly. And until Hamas brokers an unconditional surrender, of which they are unwilling to do, they could release the hostages and drop their weapons and their lives would be spared. Instead, they are using children of Gaza as cannon fodder, financed by the Iranian mullahs and dragging the entire world into this conflict. So I don't even know what we're debating at this point other than I believe that Israel, I believe the facts, Israel was unconditionally attacked on October 7th. They're responding in kind. And I would just ask you a very simple moral question. How should Israel have responded?
Not with the blanket carpet bombing.
I'm going to say there he is shifting the burden of proof instead of answering why Israel is overreacting in Gaza against Palestine. He is saying, well, you tell me. So we could say that that's shifting the burden of proof. So the burden of proof is on the person making a claim to justify that claim. So for example, if the redhead guy is asking Charlie Kirk to defend his claim that Israel is justified, Hamas is the bad guy here. And if he's saying, well, you tell me what should Israel have done? So we could say that is shifting the burden of proof. Now, logical fallacies they're subjective, so we can debate and argue about which ones are which. But we're just trying to get a general idea here with this bingo card. So let's keep going.
Of course, some kind of military operation might be necessary, but not murder on this scale. There is no justification for what is happening with the enormous death toll that is being produced. I really cannot see how you come here and you have the gall to lecture us on Christian morality and then sit here and justify the murder of thousands of civilians. Is it working? Is Hamas dismantled?
I've never said that.
You just did.
Well, no.
This is your
in war, these are called casualties of a war.
We're going to stop bringing this
Again,
to close.
I'm not going to justify every military maneuver of a 100,000 person army. Instead, what I will do is I'll be clear that there is a good guy and there is a bad guy. I honestly...
Is that the morality of a child?
Well, hold on. It's interesting you say that, because a child who knows that Israel is the good guy, Hamas is bad, has a lot more wisdom than a student like yourself at Cambridge University.
I will be glad that I will not have been somebody who has...
That's an ad hominem attack.
The Palestinian people, and I think you will have to reckon one day that you have reckoned...
Interesting. I want to close on this. So can you tell me what African country is currently ongoing a civil war?
Believe it or not, I know about Sudan because I'm not an idiot.
How about what Southeast Asian country has an ethnic cleansing going on right
I know.
Good. And you have strong opinions on both sides?
Unlike you, I take an effort to be informed about foreign
Also, whataboutism.
To conclusions. You are a culture warrior. I believe when everything is done, Mr. Kirk, people will see you and the people you supported as corrupt, as selling the country out to the lowest bidder, and of doing irreparable damage to a country I'm sure we all deep down love.
The difference
you'll have to reckon with that.
The difference is when.
What is he rubbing from his mouth there?
The difference is when we get our way, we'll still have a country, and your country will be a third world hellhole. Next question.
Thank you. That's all we've got time for today. Mr. Kirk has another engagement, so we're going to walk out of the chamber.
I'm fine with it if you want. Okay.
No, I think this is all we've got time for today.
You guys are easy.
Okay, we'll take a couple more. Does anyone have any questions?
Who's the best?
By the way, the moderators I've seen at these things at Oxford and at Cambridge, I don't know if it's just something that I'm missing here, but I find them to be kind of like pretty weak moderators. But maybe that's a good thing because they allow the debaters to take the center stage. Now this guy here, so he was framed as being a professor, but little side note, he is not a professor, he is the college bursar, which I guess is the treasurer of the university. And I looked into him because I did make a couple of videos on him framing him as a professor, which is technically misinformation because he is the treasurer of the university. So he is staff. He does have a master's degree and he does have a history of working at like a war history museum. So he's pretty knowledgeable about things. He does have a master's degree. So I guess he is qualified to be a professor and he does work at the school. So he's staff, but he's not technically a professor, even though he was framed that way in a lot of the clips that went around. But let's see what he had to say here.
Thank you. A very, very short question. Israel versus Hamas. Good guy versus bad guy. Russia versus Ukraine.
We're almost done on the bingo card.
Both are bad, one is worse.
Which way round?
Russia is worse than Ukraine.
Okay, so why haven't we pursued that?
What do you mean?
Well, it seems to me that in the whole of the current US proposition, that Ukraine is being the bad guy.
In what way? We funded Ukraine upwards to $200 billion.
Absolutely. But
we just signed a mineral deal with Ukraine, not Russia.
Yeah, but you are expecting Ukraine to give up 20% of its territory to someone who invaded it.
Well, is Crimea part of Russia or Ukraine?
Ukraine.
That's where we don't agree.
Well, I'm afraid that's part of international treaty. That's not up for grabs.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, that's hold on.
We're going to get the rest of these bingo cards, boxes.
No, America signed the agreement that gave Ukraine Crimea when the Soviet Union ended.
Right, it was done. And first of all, it never should have been done. It was largely ceremonial. But however, it was annexed under Obama. Yes, and it was a mistake. And it should be given back to Russia as a sign of good gesture to end this conflict. But who's currently controlling Crimea? Where was the Russian Navy headquartered in World War II? Where was the end of World War II? This is very
important. I'm not doubting that. I'm just saying that if we're being logical on what has happened, that you're now arguing against that flow. And I don't understand it. Because actually, why is Ukraine the bad guy?
No, I said they're bad. They're not the bad guy.
Yeah, well, you said they were both bad, but one's more bad.
Correct, yes.
So why is Ukraine bad?
There's a lot wrong with Ukraine. First of all, they're not a democracy. Zelensky refused to hold an election.
Well, no, he can't hold an election.
Oh, wait, did Churchill hold an election during the war?
Because under his constitution...
Hold on, Lincoln held an election during the war. That's not true. You can call an election. You can call a snap election. He's full dictator of the country.
No.
Because he knows that the people of Ukraine would kick him out immediately because he's deeply...
So I looked into this as well. So Winston Churchill did not hold an election during the war. The British government held off on the election until after the war was winding down. Technically, the war wasn't officially over, but it was like all but ended and like all the major conflicts were over and it was just about to end. And they intentionally held off on the election. And then Winston Churchill lost when they finally did have an election at the tail end, pretty much at the end of the war. So they did postpone their election during the war, which Charlie Kirk is misrepresenting there. He's also saying that that Zelensky can call an election whenever he wants, which is begging the question, saying that, well, it's like circular logic. Well, he can do whatever he wants, so he can just, call an election if he wants to, which is not true. He's not giving a good reason for that. He's just saying it just because.
In fact, if he wanted to show a statement to the world, he would call an election and win by 80% and say, see, I'm super popular. So that's number one. I have a problem with that.
He's also saying that like, oh, well, he would be popular with the world, just because that's what some other countries would do, then he should do it too. Just because that's what, the population says, then they should do it too. That's an ad populum fallacy. And I might be stretching, playing around with these a little bit because, like I said, it is subjective what we can consider a logical fallacy. These are just just concepts, ideas that are used in arguments, in debates, that are often misrepresenting the issue at hand. So we could say that that's an ad hominem, an ad populum attack that Zelensky should hold an election because that's what other countries do.
I have a problem with a person being propped up as a government we're sending $200 billion to that refuses even to face his voters.
Okay, I can't agree with you factually on that at all. I mean, constitutionally, Ukraine is not able to hold an election because it's under military law at the moment, and that's just a matter of fact.
Again, he can, as a prime minister or president, he can do whatever he wants.
He can't.
Okay,
He can't sign an executive order and change their constitution. Okay. Neither can the American president either, so hopefully there's a bit of
he could even do a ceremonial election to see where he actually stands with the people.
I think we call those opinion polls.
So that's, I'm going to say that's the Motte and Bailey logical fallacy, which the idea the idea that that's based on is, so this is a more obscure logical fallacy, but you have a like really difficult to defend claim, like Zelensky is a dictator. He can hold an election if he wants to. This is a claim that's very difficult to defend. So he tried that, it didn't work. And now he's saying that, well, he could hold a ceremonial election. So he's basically changing his position just to kind of make it a bit easier to argue. So that's, we're going to say a Motte and Bailey.
Yes, and they're very negative. Again, but you would agree
Fallacy.
that a person that holds on to power without the election of the sovereign is pretty questionable.
No, not in those circumstances.
Okay, then we disagree.
No, okay, that's fine. That's fine. But give me another reason why you.
They are the most corrupt country in Europe that never even met the most remote standards of joining NATO. Do you not know where a lot of this money is going?
I don't disagree that there is a problem with corruption, but the most corrupt country in Europe. Are you sure about that?
I'd have to double or triple think about that, but they're very corrupt.
Okay, so that's a little bit down. It's not absolutely.
I mean, well,
there's plenty of corruption. I mean, let's face it. We are
So he's
talking
just
about
lying there.
Comparison with some of the states you're doing business with in the Gulf.
Oh, of course, but we're not giving them money; they're giving us money. That's the difference, right? Saudi Arabia.
So it's fine.
Well, hold on a second.
It's morally acceptable to take money from corrupt people.
Well, hold on. First of all, as far as morally acceptable, you do what's best for the benefit of your country. And so, for example, we were allied with Russia during the Second World War, and I'm glad we were. And I would ask you, don't forget, how much money is too much money to send to Ukraine? We're at $200 billion right now.
I don't think you have to send any more money to Ukraine.
We agree.
I think you have to agree to support them as a free country, and perhaps sell them weapons. Like we're very happy to sell weapons to less free countries. And I think Europe will pick up the slack, as we ought to. And I don't disagree with some of the comments about Europe not looking after its own security. I just don't get this approach, which was supposedly to end the war quickly, which now seems to be elongating it, and in doing so, throwing up a smokescreen of very variable facts, if they are facts at all, about how things occurred, which actually isn't helping things. And if people can't see that Putin is stalling, I'm just...
I agree with you. I think he might be stalling.
And therefore, and I think even your president has acknowleded the fact that he thinks he might be stalling.
Correct. So we don't have a disagreement there.
No, we don't. No,
we have a disagreement about the efficacy of tactics, and we don't know. And I'm willing to say we could be wrong.
No. Oh, well,
of course you could be wrong in life. I mean,
no, we could all be wrong. But actually bringing that war to an end consistently actually isn't going very well, and I would just suggest to you that whatever tactics have been used are perhaps not the best, and they are certainly inconsistent with what's going on in the Middle East and how America has been treating parties in the Middle East. But I've had enough of your time.
No, that's a fair contention. Thank you very much.
Very much indeed.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so that's the end of the debate there. Now, we just didn't get one of using anecdotal evidence. So anecdotal evidence is when, just because like you know somebody that is affected by an issue, that you're going to kind of like broaden that out and assume that it proves your point. So let's see, where did he use anecdotal evidence? So let me know in the comments if you can find anywhere that he's using anecdotal evidence, and we're going to consider that checked off for now. So you can see the fallacies all laid out there in this debate. We could look at other debates and find the same ones because they're so numerous and pronounced when Charlie Kirk debates. And I think if there's one issue with Charlie Kirk's debates, it's not necessarily his political views, because he's conservative. There's, you might say on a policy issue that there's something wrong with that. But from a debate issue, I don't think that I wouldn't hold it against him that he's conservative or that he has, what I would say is antiquated views on a lot of these topics. I think his main issue is an arrogance. It's a superiority complex that he believes he knows more than everybody else, despite having less education. And this kind of like a, holier than thou mentality he has. So that's, I think, the main issue with Charlie Kirk is his arrogance. And that's why they made fun of him on South Park. That's why he, gets lots of pushback, and he causes lots of, controversy and conflict, and he gets lots of like hate comments as well. So, yeah, we've got the Charlie Kirk debate fallacy bingo. He knocked out all the boxes there. So I hope this was useful, informative, helpful at all in understanding these logical fallacies, and interesting checking out Charlie Kirk's debate. If anybody watched this thing, let me know in the comments below, and I'll keep making more of these. I'll see you next time.